All right. Good morning, kitty cats. Let me know if the sound is good. So I just got done watching PVK's homeroom. It is January 17th, 2025. And I immediately sent it to a group chat with Nate Heil in it. And I said, Nate, this is just rage bait for you. Which it is. So Paul's video is Kingsnorth against Christian civilization. Rousseau, Tolstoy, and yes, hemp does rock your socks. I have hemp socks. I don't like them that much. I like wool socks. But hemp is a great fabric, and this hat is hemp. So hemp denim is really fantastic. I would take hemp over cotton. But textiles have moved away from hemp for a long time. Don't distract me, Yanni. Man, so the main idea of this live stream is about when to speak and when to be silent and why. Should you speak or should you be silent because other people tell you to be silent? Maybe. Here's the problem is because you can be right and be wrong or be wrong and be right, and because there is no definitive answer for everything because of the nature of reality, the Tao, Christo-logic, and God and Mammon. Here, I'll lay out the mosaic. Because of those things, the dualisms that have the binaries that have some sort of mystical unity is sometimes the way of the world is perishing, or the way of the world. What does 1 Corinthians say? The way of the gospel looks like perishing, and the way of the world can look enticing, and it's Jesus's command to be in the world but not of the world, which I think is essentially to say you cannot serve God and mammon, and I think the way of the world is mammon. It's transactionalism, it's utilitarianism, and I was thinking about this morning. I don't know if our Jewish friends show up. I would love to know what they think about this, but like the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, right? Let's look that up. Psalm 9:10. Let's just look at Psalm 9. How about that? All right. Psalm 9. Let's pull it up. Let's look at it. So, celebration of God's justice. How perfect. Justice. I will thank. I don't want to say the tetragrammaton. I will thank God with all my heart. I will declare all your wonderful works. I will rejoice and boast about you. I will sing about your name, Most High. When my enemies retreat, they stumble and perish before you. For you have upheld my just cause. You are seated on your throne as a righteous judge. You have rebuked the nations. You have destroyed the wicked. You have erased their name forever and ever. Jacob, see that? Forever and ever. That's intense. It's an intense verse, right? Get out of here. You have erased their name forever and ever. The enemy has come to eternal ruin. You have uprooted the cities, and the very memory of them has perished Perished. That's one of the words in the New Testament. I don't know what it is in Hebrew. I probably will just go through this doing some word study stuff. This is where I need my boy Yosef or Hezi or something to come in here and help me out. But so all that, you have erased their name forever. Their enemy has come to eternal ruin. Okay, what do we mean by forever and ever? Are we talking about a quantitative duration of time? Sure reads that way in English. To eternal ruin. I mean, there's parallelism also in poetry. So, like, it seems to be saying the same thing with different words, you know? You have uprooted the cities. No more roots. What's that mean? When you don't have a root, what happens to the plant? It dies. Gone. And the very memory of them has perished. Existing in the memory of God, right? What happens if the memory is gone forever? What if their name is erased? But the Lord sits enthroned forever. But the Lord, he has established his throne for judgment. He judges the world in righteousness. He executes judgment on the nations with fairness. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. Those who know your name trust in you because you have not abandoned those who seek you. Sing to the Lord who dwell in Zion. Proclaim his deeds among the nations, for the one who seeks an accounting for bloodshed remembers them. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. Okay? Cliff note, it makes me think of Cain and Abel, first bloodshed, and then it makes me think of Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, and the blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. What does that mean in Hebrews? Okay. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. Be gracious to me, my Lord. Consider my affliction at the hands of those who hate me. Lift up from the gates of death so that I may declare all your praises. I will rejoice in your salvation within the gates of daughter Zion. The nations have fallen into the pit they made. There you go. What's that mean? The nations have fallen into the pit they made. They're reaping what they sow. If you reap destruction and chaos and retribution and bloodshed, if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. You will make a pit for your enemies, and you fall into the pit. Violence doesn't work. Doesn't work ultimately, right? Their foot is caught in the net they have concealed. The Lord has revealed himself. He has executed justice, striking down the wicked by the work of their... Can I just get rid? Shut up. Get out of here. Good grief. The Lord has revealed himself. He has executed justice, striking down the wicked by the work of their hands. I do not know what this means. So the Lord has executed justice. Why? By they have set their own destruction in their way of being in the world, right? The wicked will return to Sheol. Return, huh? All the nations that forget God. For the oppressed will not always be forgotten. The hope of the afflicted will not perish forever. Rise up, Lord. Do not let man prevail. Let the nations be judged in your presence. Put terror in them, Lord. Let the nations know they are only men. Does this have the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? I mean, what are we doing? I don't think. Okay, the fear of the Lord. What happened to it? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 9. Well, we read Psalm 9. It was good. I want to go. I don't want to. I want to go back and look at Psalm 9 as well. New International Version, okay, is not like the best version. I mean, Holman Christian Standards, all right. Okay. Wisdom has built her house. She has carved out her 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat. She has mixed her wine. Let's see. Proverbs 10. So we're talking about wisdom, right? The one who corrects a mocker will bring dishonor on himself. Ooh, this is pertinent to what we're talking about today, isn't it? The one who corrects a mocker will bring dishonor to himself, but the one who rebukes a wicked man will get hurt. Don't rebuke a mocker, he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. Instruct a wise man, and he will be wiser still. Teach a righteous man, and he will learn more. Receive with meekness the implanted word. If a wise man has ears to hear, he will hear your rebuke. He will see the seed of truth in whatever you've said, no matter how poorly you've said it, and he will receive wisdom. Because rebuke is no good if it's not received, right? That's why if you correct a mocker, you dishonor yourself, because the mocker isn't going to care. So teach a wise man, he will learn more. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For by wisdom your days will be many, and years will be added to your life. So what I was thinking about, I mean, part of me wants to go back to Psalm 9 and just do a word study, but this is not the time for that. We're not going to do that. I was thinking the fear of the Lord. What up, Nico? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of wisdom. Is the fear of the Lord the end of wisdom? I don't know. That's something I should really meditate on, because here's maybe a little bit. We've been talking about in the corner a little bit about what up, Yanni, Peter? The difference between submission and obedience. Let's see. What is the difference between obedience and submission in the Bible? No, come on, stop it. Stop it. Let's say etymologically. Because here's the thing, I don't need your... Let's see what AI says, okay? Is it going to know? So it says, in the Bible, both obedience and submission involve following authority. And this is something Nate and I knew, this conversation was going to trigger Nate, and it's a conversation that we need to have more. And a lot of it is going to come down to power and authority. I think that's a huge part of it. So obedience primarily refers to the act of following commands, while submission emphasizes a deeper attitude of yielding one's will and desires to another, signifying a more complete surrender to authority, even when it might not align perfectly with one's wishes. Essentially, obedience is the action, and submission is the mindset behind it. Oh, does that strike the people in the chats as correct? I mean, that's derived from the idea of hearing and acting on what is heard, focusing on following instructions. So obedience. Hear and obey. Huh? And submission comes from the concept of putting oneself under another, highlighting more complete yielding of one's will to another's authority. So obedience... Submission would be more like not my will, but your will, right? That would be very much the Marian and the Jesus in the garden. Not my will, but your will. Like, Lord, if it be your will, let this cup be removed from me, but not my will, but your will. Which is very tied to, it's this weird idea of self-control. Man, I want to show that Chris Green talks about in his I need to just make a clip of that. God is not a master. Let me find this section here. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going off the cuff here. Self-control. We're gonna just we'll try to find. Okay, he's talking about, like, we'll start here. We're going to try to find the right spot because this is where he talks about self-control, which I think is very good. But I'm going back some to try to get some context. Let's see if this one.
The Father is not greater than the Son. The Son and the Father are one. As we say in the Creed, he is God of God, very God of very God, light of light, of one being with the Father. Begotten, not made. The Son and the Father are co-equal, co-eternal, identical in every way, except that the Father is the Father and the Son is the Son. And that, the fullness of that equality, the infinite, unbroken intimacy they share, is the relationship you and I have with God.
Oh!
It is the relationship you and I have with God because Jesus accomplished it in his life. That what happens in the life of Jesus is that he brings the divine and the human into perfect intimacy. So just picture the cross. The arms of the cross intersect with that vertical beam. And at the point of that intersection, that's where we live. Where the divine and the human, the heavenly and the earthly, the eternal and the temporal are perfectly at one. That's what the word atonement means. We are perfectly at one in him, so that there's no confusion and no mixture, but there's also no rivalry between God being God and me being myself. Which is why in Galatians 5, when we're getting the list of the fruit of the Spirit, you know what the culminating fruit of the Spirit is? Self-control. Because where God is, you are. Where God is most present, you are most yourself. God is not like the demons. The demons possess and strip you of your agency, and strip you of your mind, and strip you of your personhood. Where God is present, you are you. Uniquely you, fully you, utterly you. How is that possible? Because that's what Jesus lives. And he lives it into death. I'm like 3 minutes from being done, believe it or not.
Okay, I recommend that video a lot. I will put it in the, I mean, you can find it if you want. It's just God is not a master. And I think that part is so big. I think it really is. It's the, so if, let's just say, the submission and obedience thing that we just looked up on AI is right. Obedience is just hearing and doing. It doesn't actually matter so much if you want to. You know, it's kind of like, think of a little kid saying, you know, say you're sorry. You know, say you're sorry for this. And she's like, well, I don't want to. Doesn't matter. Say you're sorry. Okay, so the kid said, you know, sorry. That's obedience, according to that way of seeing it. And submission is more, okay, not my will, but your will. Submission is more like, I believe, help my unbelief. It's that I don't understand this, but I trust you more than I trust my own lack of understanding. It's really, it is that faith. It's that relational trust and faith in another to such a degree that you're saying, it's not power. It's not just like you have power over me, so I must do what you say. It's not that. It's I submit to your authority and I trust you. So then in that sense, submission and authority would be the same thing. And that's even like Brooklyn, Lou, his question to me the other day, like, do I trust myself or do I trust the church or whomever I accept as an authority over me? Yes. That's the self-control that Chris Green is talking about right there. He's saying you are most yourself in that submission to God. That submission to God is your truest self. And that's why self-control, that paradox of self-control, you are not leaning on your own understanding, but in all your ways you're acknowledging him and he is making your paths straight. That is the kind of submission that we're talking about. And so that's self-control. And this is why there can be no prescribed answer to questions like, should you be silent about controversial ideas, albeit be it hell? Okay, how far? We're 21 minutes in, and then I will say a few more things and open it up. These are the ideas that I'm really passionate about that tend to really piss people off. Okay? Christian universalism, universal reconciliation of all things, the fact that the right and the left hand of God, justice and mercy, are one. They're maybe the same act, which is forgiveness and self-control. Again, because those are where the two things become one. There's a distinction, but there's no division in forgiveness. There's the facts of history don't change with forgiveness, but the meaning of it does. There's a transformation probably in you and the other and in the entire world in the act of forgiveness. The enemy, the other, the one who is forgotten, who has victimized the people of God, if we go back to the Psalm 9 thing, becomes remembered in the forgiveness and in the reconciliation of the person not holding the act of judgment and violence against them. So then the trap that they fall into, the trap that they set for themselves, and the net that ensnares them that they've set for the other that they've fallen into, they are lifted out of through the forgiveness of the person they've trapped. And God's justice and mercy is united in that act of forgiveness. And you can't prescribe that, should you? Oh, I gotta talk about the critical theory piece of it here. So this is an aspect. I met with a friend yesterday who I don't think watches my stuff a lot, but it's a local friend, obviously, who I really value their friendship because they are TLC familiar, but they are definitely not caught within the potentially siloed network of collective cognition that TLC sometimes gets into, because we're all interacting about this stuff all the time. And so they're familiar of this world and follow some of it, but they're not, they're kind of an outsider to the TLC community because this person thinks of themselves as a leftist, and which they actually distinguish the difference between leftism and liberal in the modern parlance. And they're not big Jordan Peterson fans. And so, but this is an area where I very much agree with them about, like Jordan Peterson, for example, his take on, the neo-Marxist postmodernists or whatever. This is an aspect of critical theory that is true, is that systems, and this gets into like Paul Kingsnorth, Christian civilization, and these are aspects of things that I think I could have a good conversation with Jordan Peterson about this, and he would acknowledge some of this stuff. I think is that systems that scale and that work in transactional ways, they prioritize and they privilege the majority. Like, I've heard Peterson talk about that. So like a civilization is going to privilege the majority demographics of the civilization, because that's what civilizations do. They are networks and systems that are meant to the best of their construction, benefit the majority of people in the culture and in the system. And so whatever the more, the majority is, the more, that's who they most want to help. It doesn't mean that they don't give a shit about the outsiders, or like, so like even, but at scale, we're talking about at scale. So like even a family, right? If someone doesn't, oh shoot, so I can't, oops, my bad. Sorry, do not disturb. You can't, if I take care of my family, or if I marry my wife, I've talked about this before, that doesn't mean that that's like a damnation of all other women, and that I don't care about other women and just like, whatever, forget them. No, but it means I've prioritized my wife and I've prioritized my family. A civilization will work that way. A state operates that way. Minnesota should prioritize Minnesota more than, and then probably their neighboring states more than Florida, more than Alaska. It doesn't mean they're just like, screw those guys, but we prioritize this. That's how the nature of hierarchy works that way. I mean, you have to do that to operate in the world. The problem that I have with that, and where I think critical theory is right, is that those systemic patterns within institutions and cultures and empire at scale, again, think of the difference between scale and growth, that I think it was, what's his name? Jordan, who's the other Jordan? Jordan Hall talked about with Seabax, right? Is that at scale, you can scale things that work exponentially, like machine stuff will scale exponentially with just straight one-to-one analysis. This or that, this or that, this or that, ones and zeros, scale. And institutions that work on a one-to-one thing and they have no discernment outside of a one-to-one, once they get so big, are going to have systemic injustice and collapse built into the system. This is what I mean, and my often quoted Paul Tillich quote is like, all institutions are inherently demonic. At a certain scale, at a certain collapse, it's like, think of 2008 and Too Big to Fail, when we bought into that bullshit that the American economist said, like, these banks are too big to fail. No, they're too big to not fail. They're bound to fail at some point. Like, you can't, when something scales and scales and scales and scales and scales within this certain mode, it's going to have built-in systems of injustice that will collapse. That's called technological babble. And that's true. That's a true thing. That's legitimate. And so, like, but where that can't happen is at small scale, Dunbar number, family stuff. So for me to criticize technological babble at scale and systemic corruption when things get way too big, that is not to negate the value and the necessity of hierarchy in proper relationships that are necessary, like my family. I don't think of my family as an institution. I think of my family as a body, not an institution. An institution is something that operates within the realm of machine and scale. I think it is something that is a kind of techne that operates outside of the natural limitations of like evolved biological life or something. And so there are aspects of critical theory in that are true, that are legitimate. And so, like, how to tie this into thought policing? I should have started here. I went off on a big tangent. And when you should speak and when you should be silent. So can a big institution like Okay, again, back to submission and obedience. Hear and obey. A giant institution, a global institution, or a system, or a company or something can operate under the realm of power and hear and obey. Do this, like we say this, do this. We say this, do this. But all that's going to do, that's like a factory. And that's identical replicationism. And like that's the Borg. The Borg can operate that way. Ideological possession can operate that way. True human growth and the God of your own understanding and real submission that's rooted in trust, in like true submission, because not my will, but your will. I don't think you can do not my will, but your will to an institution. Because that's an institution is operating in the realm of a principality. You can do it in a family. You can have mutual submission between a husband and a wife, or you can have submission of a. To what degree can a child really submit in that kind of self-control way to a parent? I don't know. I mean, debatably, arguably, a child can't really do that until they have some degree of them knowing who they are, and probably they're an adult. Their prefrontal cortex is fully developed. And this is kind of like the Douglas Harding infant, toddler, adult, and then seer. Or it's like, it makes me think of Raj and like Sikhism, Sikhi, and the headlessness. That is the kind of submission. That's exactly, I think, what Sikhi is getting at. Raj has spoken about that brilliantly in other videos. If you just look up Raj, this little corner of the internet, what's a good video with Raj? We talked about this on Randos United, I think, with Raj. Wasn't it on Randos? Or was it? No. It's not. Maybe it was on Grail Country or something. Shoot. I think it was on Grail Country now that I'm thinking about it. Here it is. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the. So it was Nate and Raj and I discussing. Look at that. The title is called God is Unity. And we are talking about. I'll put it in the comments here. But Raj talks about the headlessness in Sikhi of I think they're called the guru that you submit to, like the initial guru at the beginning of Sikhi. Let's read about it. What is it? How do you spell it? Introduction to. All right, let's see. Sorry. Okay, we're here. I was sharing all the time. So, Aziz Sikhi shared a quote by Jalaluddin Rumi about hopelessness and hope on Twitter, saying, no, hopelessness, this is not what we're talking about. Headlessness, Sufism. Okay, can we just... Whatever. No, this is not what we're talking about. Sorry. It's in that video, but essentially it's the idea that like your leader, the idea is that you go into this tent where you can't see anything with the thought that, like, he's going to cut off your head. And that's like total submission to, it's like, I mean, that, how more radical of a metaphor or an illustration or an actual, like, I give up my life to you. You are my life. Like, I trust you with everything, including my head, my thoughts, my being, my everything. But there's this weird thing within Christianity where this is the self-control that I think Chris Green was getting at, is that I submit myself to God But then where that God manifests himself is like in Second Peter, is like, you will need no man to teach you, but God will teach you from the inner man. And that's receive with meekness the implanted word. And that's Jesus's like purify your eye, that your eye is one. And then you become an integrated person, and you just see reality for what it is. You don't have to analyze and judge anything. You just see reality for what it is. And then you act accordingly, because it's not I that live, but Christ that lives in me. And that's the ultimate form of self-control and submission to God, which is you becoming yourself. That is you. That is who you really are. All right. Did I not put the invite in here? I'm going to put the invite in, look at comments. I feel like I got a little all over the place at the end of this sucker. People could come in and talk about it. Grim, I'm sorry. I don't know that if I really... I mean, there is no answer. There is no prescriptive answer of... Yep, there I am talking. So this last one is the StreamYard link that I got to pin. There is no prescriptive answer of like when you should talk and when you should be silent. But I will talk about this while I look at comments until people come in. This is a little bit of my problem of the institutional idea, and that I think is ultimately rooted in power, that people think other people just need to be quiet or shut up about whatever, universalism, all the ideas that really piss people off, Christian universalism, nonviolence, the idea that you shouldn't use violence and power to control or manipulate, either implicitly or explicitly, either soft power or hard power to control and manipulate what other people do. Because if you do that, there is no real self-control. If self-control and submission is the ultimate Christian, or is the ultimate virtue, if you manipulate someone, they're not really being self-controlled and submitting to you. It's not really the proper spirit manifesting in them. It's just blind robotic obedience. So, Michael, what up?
Howdy, sir.
Hey, good to see you. I'm looking at comments. What do you... Oh, CW is giving book ISBN numbers. Wow.
It's very CW.
What has come up for you in so far in the stream, or just in life? It doesn't have to be related to this.
So I mean, you and I have talked about some of this a little bit in the past, but you know, I've been deep in on Father Stephen DeYoung's work for the last few months.
Okay.
And right, so every time he brings up the bodily resurrection and the consuming fire of God's love, right, and like to point back to like Saint Basil, and the same fire is responsible that has to burn away the dead wood, but is also a warm embrace. And I, having gone through like a fairly substantial prodigal son path thing where I was and even just like in my own personal relationship with my own parents, like the people who raised me, right, their love while I was in deep rebellion, it was at sometimes it like burned, right? I hated it. And then other times it would just become the void. So there was both an intense burning aspect of it, but then it could also drift into a blackness void, right? And so and we see like that language both being used, right? So that I found that really interesting. But then in repentance, right, in metanoia, turning around, walking this other path, and in the most embodied sense of coming back to my parents, my actual my fleshly parents, go, okay, now this love's different, right? Now it's this warm embrace. Now it's healing. So that was one thing that came to mind. Another thing was like cooperation versus coercion, right? And so I had this moment post, let's say, Peterson unauthorized exorcist experience, right? Where I'm in this re-enchanted world, and at first I'm like friendlier to my upbringing into Christian thought, but I'm also just like way friendlier to the larger like Jungian archetypal, world. So now I'm like personally encountering entities, right? And I'm hanging out in these like Nietzschean corners initially, right? And I found that uh, it was very much so like a summoning up of particular archetypes, right? That you take that yoke on, right? And then it's very coercive, right? You kind of lose yourself in that. And if it wasn't for examples of like guiding light embodied Christians, right? Even just on YouTube, for God's sake, whether it was like Paul Vanderklay or Jonathan Peugeot or these other examples, in order to like actually start showing up at Christian things, like go to this place in Wichita. It's like a ecumenical in a very specific sense, in like encountering these people who are um, really on a earnest path of obedience and repentance. Uh, I don't know that I'd have that guiding light to then be free from the oppression slash possession of those archetypes of these entities, right? And only then, right, in taking on like this guiding light, the spirit that is holy, was there freedom, and the highest me was found in Christ. I mean, I don't know how other to say that, So I don't know if anything that maps, but
So you were coming across these Jungian archetypes that you were saying were potentially and encountering entities. I mean, all this sounds kind of like divination of a sort.
sure is.
You were doing this. Where was this happening? Was this happening online, or these were meetings, or what? Or
So there was like little online communities, uh, and for me, it was just like I had this like dramatic ego death kind of thing, right? Where this left left hemisphere construct just like collapsed, like house on sand just
yeah,
collapsed.
yeah,
So house on sand collapses. There's predators in the wilderness, right? There's no defenses against that anymore. And
right.
so like encountering those predators is just like
Mhm.
there's no defense against it. So it's just like oh, okay, well, let me, and then from a Nietzschean lens, it's like, well, I will by sheer willpower um, act like a conductor with these entities and call them at will, or a divination kind of thing. Uh, and so you see some like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting, or oh, this is working, this is doing something. Yeah, it's doing something, all right, right. But I could see all of these bad fruit coming as
Hmm.
as a result, right? It is not ambiguous, right, of the consequences. Like each path towards taking on those different yokes was a path towards death, and there was it was becoming more and more self-evident that there was only one narrow path, right, in agapic love that didn't have these same consequences, but it requires a lot of sacrifice of like selfish things I want to do.
Yeah. What that makes me think of is that's like a so Kale Zeldin has been talking a lot. I mean, he has been bringing this up a bunch, but he's been talking about that hideous strength on Twitter a bunch. I see him posting about it. And I love that book. And what you're describing makes me think of that hideous strength exactly. Because I think that's what's going on is whether it's like those that are speaking to Hermes or these
Hmm.
Jungian archetypes, or we're Malcolm Guite wouldn't say it's a re-enchantment. It's just like it's a collapse of
Hmm.
these left-brained paradigms that make us
Yeah.
realize, well, like, the world has always been enchanted. And so like, all of a sudden, when you're being really violent, I mean, this is how I think the world works. Like, when you enact violence, when you get anger, the Bible says, be angry and do not sin. But when you're angry and then you lash out in anger,
Yeah.
you're being possessed by Mars.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Absolutely.
that's just
Absolutely.
what that is, I
That's what
think.
that
And so,
is.
and I think that we are becoming reawakened to that. But like, what that hideous strength does, and related to what you were just saying, is that the Nietzschean thing. I'm not as familiar with Nietzsche to just. I think, like most thinkers, he's a little bit more complicated. It's like anything. You can critique Calvin or Augustine or Nietzsche, but like, the Nietzscheanism is probably a little bit different than what Nietzsche was exactly. But in like that hideous strength, that's what the leader. Have you read the book?
But only like excerpts.
Okay, so like in that hideous strength, essentially, it's Lewis's Ransom trilogy, which is
Hmm.
about all this stuff. In the first book, they end up going, spoiler alerts, they end up going to Mars,
Hmm.
Malcandra. The second book is in Paralandra,
That's right.
Venus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's Mars and Venus. It's very
Hmm.
feminine, but you find out that they're angelic principalities, or thrones, maybe
Yeah.
dominions, that are ruling over the planets,
Yes.
that have personality, that have names.
Yeah.
And then so he sets up this whole cosmic thing, which I think is kind of how the world works. And then he comes back to Earth. The third book, that Hades Strength, is set in Earth, and Earth is called the silent planet, because we are out of touch and out of communion with the rest of the heavenly world,
Yeah.
because of what's happened on Earth. And then, but you see these dynamics then play out, where in a sense there are people communing with entities all the time,
That's right.
some consciously, some unconsciously. But there are these people that are leading this institution called the NICE, the National Institute of Coordinated Experiments. And there are people, it's so great, it's perfect. I think it's exactly how the world works. And there are people in the lower levels of the institution who are communing with these spirits too, but they don't really know it. They don't consciously know they're communing with spirits, but they are. But then there are people in the top realms that remind me of what you said about Nietzsche, who basically think that their will, they can
Hmm.
control and manipulate and commune with these spirits. But what, like, they don't understand is, like, you're fucking with stuff that's way above your pay grade.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not gonna be, whatever you think you're doing and controlling and getting out of this, like, you are going to get eaten. You are going to get destroyed. These things are not nice. They operate in the realm of mammon, transaction, and violence.
That's
That is
right.
how they operate. And I think this is why, back all the way to the beginning, one of the big reasons that I advocate for Christian nonviolence, and I will not be violent in my advocating of it, is I just do not think, I think that is the way of the world. I do not think that is the way of the kingdom. You cannot get synergistic submission out of anyone, your children or any other person. This is why receive with meekness the implanted word. You cannot, no matter what I want to advocate for and prescribe, unless you receive it and want it yourself and willingly submit to it yourself, it's not valuable. It's just manipulation and coercion and blind obedience, which is the
Yeah.
tools of Antichrist.
Well, so the Zealots are effectively a Mars cult, right? So the Zealots want a Messiah to wage war against the Romans for freedom, right? And instead, here they are encountering Jesus, who is completely outside the boundaries of what they're looking for, and so Paul has to go through this explicitly. He has this little zealot phase, and so when Paul inevitably encounters Christ, right, then now it shifts to no, be obedient towards that law, right? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. uh and so like instead of taking on the yoke of warfare, right? Because that's effectively what's happening with that kind of zeal. Instead of taking that on, that produces certain kinds of fruits, which is a lot of death, then there's a sacrifice is being paid, and you go, hey, no, but like my best chance at changing what should be changed is in obedience as a Roman citizen, as far as it can be given, as long as God is being given what's God's, right? So given to Caesar what is Caesar's, given to God what's God's.
Alan, this is your time to talk. Okay.
I
Yeah.
was listening intently to Michael, so his soothing voice was
Yeah.
just enchanting me.
So here's something I want to throw at you guys. So one of the comments in PBK's video, this isn't to put you on blast, whoever it was. I mean, it is, but it's not. You know what I mean? It's all in love. I have to point things out as fodder for conversation without judging you. But
Someone said Luke wasn't the most handsome person in the corner, so
yeah, they said it was some idiot named Alan.
I don't know. Some account seemed like a cool, smart guy who said it. Whoever it was, I don't know. Some alt account for someone. I don't know who said it, but it seemed pretty. His reasoning was pretty. Sorry, what were you saying, Luke?
So it said where was it? I mean, there's too many comments now. Oh yeah. So it was like, sorry, this is Michael, French name, Jean Tellier. So they, I don't want to misgender you. Is they misgendering? What's the neutral pronoun if you don't know? Can you just say they? But what if that's not their pronoun? I mean, what do I do? It's so hard. Anyhow, they say advocating desert mysticism on the internet. I roll. Criticizing Kingsnorth. And then, so like, there's going to be the deepest aspects of Christianity, I think, and probably any religion. I think this is probably true in Judaism with Kabbalah. It's probably true in Islam with Sufism, is mysticism. It's that Karl Rahner quote, the Christian in the future will be a mystic or not at all. Now, does this mean that so when you're talking about the most deep things, they're going to seem paradoxical, almost to the point of being McMo absurd, that then people are like, why are you even saying that? Right? Because Paul Kingsnorth, so in defense of Paul Kingsnorth, this is what I'll say, is that he largely just he writes, and he does that on Substack, which is on a computer, I'm sure, unless he just is so pure that he doesn't touch a computer and he just hands the handwritten manuscript to someone else, like the Jewish person. It's just like, turn the light on for me, or drive me around on.
Yeah, but the manuscript is techne too.
Well, but it's whatever. It's maybe an acceptable form of techne. Maybe he just speaks, and then someone else writes it down, who's like a little bit more corrupt, and then there's someone else.
They hand it to
they hand it to someone else who types it up.
Yeah,
and then
but each person is
not even really on the video. It's a hologram.
Yeah. Each person is going to a slightly worse version of heaven,
It's
like Paul's
like
going to the
Russian
ultimate, the Holy of
dolls.
Holies. Yeah. And then the guy who types it out is going to like the dingier, like outer ring of heaven. And
so
the Uber driver.
So here's the thing, again, because there's no prescription for anything. In my opinion, is Paul completely legitimate and fine criticizing the machine via technology? Yes, I have no problem with that. Trampling down death by death, trampling down the machine by machine. Also, I don't know that Paul would say, if you just asked him, like, is it wrong to be on the internet? Is it wrong to be on a computer? But there's a lot baked into that, right? This is Chad's cosmological burrito. Like, what went into the making of this computer and this iPhone? Unethical things. So to what degree can you participate in that and not be condemned yourself? Are there some? This is why I like when my priest was asked once, I asked him once about the rich young ruler. And this is my favorite interpretation of the rich young ruler, who comes to Jesus and says, what must I do to be saved? And he says, the commands. And he's like, I've kept all these since youth. And he's like, but I still lack something. And so Jesus says, okay, well then give all you have to the poor. Is that a universal prescription for all people? In like the Tolstoy sense, that how Tolstoy takes it, like if you have 3 jackets, you're robbing from the poor. Because like the people who were criticizing Kingsnorth in the PBK homeroom brought up Tolstoy, because they said Tolstoy already tried all this stuff, being a radical. He was a radical zealot for this kind of hyper pietism, like give up everything, let people come into your house and take whatever they will. Some people are called to that, I think, because of the nature of an aspect of personalism where like their salvation requires that they give up everything they have. Because of the way that they are, they have to do that. Does that mean everyone has to do that? No.
Well, that's like a perfect example of context dependent, and I think to your point of just like, just when you universalize things, like you are in the domain, you are a principality in power to the extent that of the things that you have control over, and like it's all the way up and all the way down. But if you try and extend that beyond what you're capable of, if you're like, oh, well, I'm going to get into government and I'm going to force everyone to be communist, it's like, it's probably better just to start with like, can you like be communist yourself? And then once you start realizing what areas you actually have, like you can do and do not, enter into and do not sin. To your point about the rich young ruler, it's like, oh, I'm doing it. And he's like, keeps raising the bar. And then it's just like, I can't go into that next step. It's like, you need to check your own heart posture and what you are and aren't capable of, and like wrestle with that horizon that you're at. You're the only person at that horizon, you're the only person who is you, you're the only person who's the rich young ruler who needs to think about, because if you're just a horrible sinner, if you're just a horrible sinner, you're not gonna be like, oh, how do I be saved? It would be like, well, sell everything you own. That would be like the worst advice, because then they'd be like, no, I have nothing, and I'm a sinner, and my life sucks, and I'm gonna, if anything, I'm gonna be a worse person. I'm gonna be breaking in people's houses. So like telling someone who's like completely unsaved, like sell everything you own, is horrible advice. But for someone who, quote unquote, has kept all these since I was young, it's different.
So especially in thinking about the Kingsnorth stuff, which I really appreciate what he's saying, and I also lean the other direction, right? But we're contained within this same community here, and this happens directly within my own parish, right? Where I've got some friends within my parish who are like deeply down the Kingsnorth train and just like separate from all these things. And so I think about the Christians that had to stay within that did stay within the urban areas for whatever reasons, right? Versus ones who went out to the desert, right? And you can even think about this in terms of the difference between, I'm just going to isolate 2 groups here, the Pharisees versus the Essenes, right? So the Essenes are out in the desert, right, separated from everybody else, right? But the Pharisees are like in it. They're in the mix, in the city, part of the Roman Empire, right? And there's not really an either or. It's sort of a both. You can see the references to what the Essenes were carrying with Enoch as a lens to reveal Genesis or the Torah, right? So you can see that, and you can see that being carried along, but also there's an embeddedness with the Pharisees regularly, right? It's like, okay, well, hey, they're carrying the right tradition, they've got the right temple, they've got the right scripture, but they're hypocrites, right? And so what do we see as a result of this over 300, 400 years? I mean, the rest of the story is so important. It's like, yeah, all those Christians, right, in the urban areas, not limited to, but at least the urban areas, they're being fed to lions, right, are part of this path that transforms the empire, right? Both are necessary.
Hi.
Hi, Chad.
Is your mammonistic watermark up there? Is that a snowflake melting in the sun? I think that's beautiful.
This is like some kind of Mac OS nonsense that's happening here. I don't even know.
I don't know. Are you talking about for the one? I think that's some kind of Grail country thing that I didn't.
Satanic.
Oh,
It's satanic. Yeah,
I like
Good.
it. I like it.
Good.
it's a
I just wanted to
meditations on the
say,
tarot thing. Like once when Grail country was all together up in the Pacific Northwest, we did a divination with meditations on the tarot card. We sacrificed a goat before Nate barbecued it, and
is that
all
what
of
we ate?
and we were doing drugs together in like a ritualistic sex act, and then that image just came to all of us.
You never go
A
full
snowflake
pagan.
melting in
Never
the
go full pagan.
snowflakes melting in the sun. No, I just wanted
No.
to come on because
But the barbecue was great.
I felt like admonished that because I had said I just want to say I didn't think that we should not talk about stuff. I just want to clarify because I'm self-centered. I thought you were talking about me that whole monologue. I thought he's just
This is like
admonishing me.
this is like what PVK has said. A good sermon is just like they're talking exactly to me.
I was like, man, but like, no, it's not that. It's not that I don't think we should talk about it. My little thing on the universalism thing was like, it was like if you think that universalism is like the way, then that all might be saved, I suppose. Like that's the hopeful thing there. Then why even have to state it because it's already happened? So that's all I was thinking. So I just want to say that.
I think
It's
because
like
of like
saying, "Oh, we're breathing." You know, we're breathing, right? It's like, "Oh, yeah, are we breathing?" Like, yeah, we're breathing.
I think because of the fact of like the rich young ruler thing, and because there's many different people that need different things. In the same way, like this has happened to me a minor degree. Like I've had over the course of my life, I've had I don't know a handful of people reach out to me and say, and like Pickens Choose, who's in here, like he essentially said it at the end of the video that like
Yeah.
part of his being okay with God or coming back to God, I don't know the full details of his
Yeah.
story, was realizing that a kind of reconciled God to all of creation in a way that where you don't have this. And I mean, I'm just saying infernalist. It's not like some pejorative thing. I'm just trying to use words because like that's what it means. Like that kind of idea of hell. Some people just can't do it.
Yeah.
Like that really messes them up, and they need to understand there's other ways of being able to conceive of God that, and in a way, like what's so funny to me about universalism is like it's not, in a way it's a kind of absolutizing, but it remains mystical. Like I say this all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's all going to happen.
So,
And
in my translation of the woke left, woke right Bible, the story of the rich young ruler is like the rich young ruler, goes to Jesus and is like, like, what do I do, like to get in the kingdom? And Jesus in his wisdom knows that the MAGA ruler is like, kind of homophobic. And so he's like, what is whatever the commandments say? And he says, oh, I've done all that since I was young. And he's like, okay, then what? He's like, well, I just want to get in the kingdom. And then Jesus is like, all right, you see that gay man over there? I want you to go over there and give him a kiss right on his lips. And he's like, I can't do it. And then he runs away. So that's my version of kind of like the rich. Isn't that kind of like the same idea? It's like you like to kind of like surrender the idol that is separating you from God, something like that. All right. And
yeah,
I know
no,
that's really offensive, and I probably shouldn't say it because I shouldn't talk about things, but still.
no, it's fine. I mean, heaven is gay dudes
I'm
make it.
saved
No, you
anyways,
get it.
so it's all good. I'm already going to heaven, so I don't really care. It's
Can
fine.
I
got
throw a few
saved.
thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, just not
Uh,
too gay. Don't go too
oh.
gay, though.
So first on what came to mind was watching Peterson and Father Stephen DeYoung talk in Tarpon Springs at Peugeot Fest, and so they're having a discussion on the bodily resurrection, and Peterson. So Father Stephen effectively lays out something that to some looks universalist, to others looks infernalist, right? It depends on where your stance was, what position you're coming from. Now, for any universalists, right, it looked very like, oh, well, here's just a black and white thing. He's talking about dead wood that has to burn away. And so Peterson effectively says something, well, what happens if you're effectively all dead wood, right? And, well, if you're
I love you
if you're
guys.
Bye, Chad.
if you're mostly deadwood, you're mostly deadwood, and what has to burn has to burn. So you could imagine, let's say, I stay in the Nietzschean corner. I'm trying to do a will to power. I'm like letting Mars possess me all the time, and I am anger and war incarnate. When my flesh passes, right, however much I had let that seep in, right, however much I had taken Mars into my heart, into my noose, right, then all of that effectively has to burn away, and whatever little glimpse of goodness and beauty there is, has to be left. Now, I don't want to I don't know, like remove the mystery from this, and I don't even know. I shouldn't. I don't know what I'm talking about here, but just to pack on another thought on top of it. So I'm listening to Peugeot talk to Kurt Jamenthal. I don't know how to say his last name.
Yeah.
And he's deep in on a couple of different areas, and one of the things that they're picking up on is something like a collection, like a collective consciousness, like in a Jungian lens, sort of what's kept in memory and being alive in memory. And then within the Orthodox tradition, right, where when someone passes, we always, memory eternal, memory eternal, memory eternal. And there is this way, right, in which the wife of one of our parishioners, right, is 80 years old, passed away last year, right, but the love that she showed, what I understood about her, the relationship that we had, remembering her, like remembering her, right? She's alive, right? And for all the non-Orthodox folks out here, this is one way to understand what we're doing with these icons and saints talk, right? Is that they're alive. We still have the pictures, we have the memories, we celebrate them, and they are part of just like the parishioner's wife who died last year, right? These older saints that we're talking about are part of this cloud of witnesses, right, that are alive in Christ, and both are redeemed in Christ and maintain uniqueness and individuality, even though they're unified within Him. So the reason I say some of that is like, well, if I'm mostly deadwood and I become Mars incarnate, and all I'm doing is just like waging war all the time, right? There's a good incentive to forget me, right? And to let that burn away, let all that deadwood burn away, and to not keep that alive. And at some degree, I think that's inevitable. Some do persist, and that's what we call demons.
So, Pickens, I want to hear what you have to say. I mean, what you talked about reminded me a lot of that Berdyaev quote that Nate gave me from the other day that I put on my channel. But it's like, the following is the answer we arrive at when we abandon a quantitative correlation between time and eternity. Whoever enters the region of eternity without an ounce of love enters it without an ounce of love, i.e., he enters eternal hell. For to live without love, this is hell. And to live without love is in the region of eternity. This is to live in eternal hell. Hell is a state of the soul powerless to come out of itself. Absolute self-centeredness, dark and evil isolation, i.e., final inability to love. And I mean, then it goes on saying other things, but like it's the length of that. I mean, it reminds me of Cal talking about his no hell NDEs and people who had these near-death experiences, and they essentially don't believe in hell, but like they have this experience where they, like they've been to hell and they experience it as an eternity. Because this is the whole time question and the quantitative thing of time. Like really, and this is why I'm so adamant about it, is essentially to be an infernalist is to absolutize hell as an infinite duration of time. It's to absolutize time and the experience of it in the way that we have it infinitely. So that is for sure absolutizing hell. And I just say, like, I don't think you should do that. Like, I think you can affirm all three in a way, but like the time piece is beyond us. And like the last thing I'll say is the struggle I've always had personally with it is like, what if you're mostly dead wood? Well, yeah, that's completely true. It's just my problem is I think what it means to be is to be made in the image and likeness of God. And so the core of what your being is God.
Yeah, if there's a divine spark and Jesus is in your heart, whether you accept it or not, whether you
That's
accept
what it
him
means
or
to
not.
be.
Yeah,
And so like I don't think
Yeah.
there's anyone that's 100% dead wood.
I
Otherwise
think
they wouldn't exist.
That's right.
Yeah.
But so the way that I picture it is like, well, if all that's left is that little divine spark that hasn't been fostered whatsoever, then what is Christ returns to Christ, and there and I'm, that is the deepest part of me, but boy, there's not a lot of distinctiveness about it.
Yeah. Well, that distinctiveness is made manifest through the suffering of transformation.
Yeah, that's right.
Christian thing. All right, JD, what up, buddy?
Hey, yeah, I like what Michael was saying about, this idea of somebody being almost like possessed by Mars or something like that. And, as hopeful, as much of a hopeful universalist as I am, if I can imagine somebody like not going to heaven, I've always imagined like a person could get there and be so filled with anger and rage at seeing somebody else who they don't think deserves to be there, and then they say, I want no part of this, because of that anger is twisting somebody up. But I don't know, man. Like I think everybody has deep down, I just believe that. I feel everybody deep down at the core of their being has that goodness, and what happens is the world twists us up, and when I like to believe that when this life ends and we see the truth and we see how much God loves us and we understand what we didn't understand in this fog, that a lot of that stuff, like I don't think anybody would be beyond that healing. I mean, that's just like a matter of faith. I have nothing to prove, but I have nothing to prove anything, So if I'm going to believe in a God, I'm going to believe in a God that can heal anybody.
Amen.
Not that this is a big like difference, but I just think there's also a difference between the goodness or the seed of the goodness, of like, I don't even need you to like do it like, oh, well, like I'm a bad guy, but secretly on the inside, I'm a good guy. You don't even have to be that. And like, it's just that like the fact that you have the potential to understand what it would be to be a good guy, that you have the seed before even any of the fruit. Like that's the gift that God gives you, and very similar to what you said. It's just like, I don't think it needs to be like, oh, secretly I hate being Hitler and I wish I could just like paint flowers.
Yeah,
it's more like,
I didn't mean it quite like that, but
no. I know you don't mean it that way. Yeah.
And that's the problem of like the seed thing, like, right? Seed of the logos logoi or whatever, can the seed of the logos be destroyed? That potency for manifesting Christ to the world, can that be destroyed? Well, then it's then it's not an actual potency. Then it never manifested. It's not actually a really seed of the logos if it can't be manifest.
Well, yeah. So that's the Elohim that is eternal, Alpha and Omega, has no end, cannot die, defeats death by death. Whereas every other Elohim, right? Mars can die, right? The Greek gods can die, right? That's the great hope, right? That's part of the message of Evangelion, right? Is that they can die.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is for me, that would be the hope, is that even they can be transformed. That's the redemption of the angels thing. That's my broad framework, is like we the sons of God are revealed, and then they save the rest of the cosmos.
Well, so did you? Gosh, there was this not to invoke Neil Gaiman this week particularly.
You can. I'm okay with that.
But so Joe had like a little thing he did on some work that he did in the past. So it's this story of cats, right? And so
that's at the end of it. It's at the very end of it's the last episode of Sandman or whatever on Netflix, which is his his thing.
Yeah. So you get this house cat, right? And like the house cat is just subjected to the human, their human owner's will, so on and so forth. But the cat that like tells a tale of days of old when they weren't so small, and the big cats used to be in control and terrorize the humans instead of the humans being in control of the cats. And so it ends with something like the cat saying that a day is coming where there'll be big cats again, right? And so there's, to tame the passions is sort of like taming that feline, right? Where to put the highest orienting principle on the throne, right, as a highest orientation of the logos of logos, then can take fleshly passions, deny them divinity, godship, right, and then order them appropriately, so that my anger and capacity for war can be used to protect, right, or to call out something that's wrong, but not too harshly, right? It's this is where the narrative that Luke is going after with self-control becomes crucial, right? Of like, yeah, these passions being ordered in the right way given that self-control.
Sorry, I was slightly distracted. JD and Alan aren't going to respond to you. I apologize, Michael.
I guess
That's okay. I gotta jump anyways because I'll be back later.
Okay, see you, buddy.
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful when it comes to justifying the embrace of violence. But I like the way Michael put it, at least, that if you're going to find a place for that, then it has to be submissive to a higher value of, in defense of the good or whatever, and not and to be always able to moderate the harshness. Don't go harsher than you have to be if you're going to act in anger. But boy, I think we really need to be careful when we use our faith to find a place for anger and violence and things like that. I'm not saying there is no place, but I tend to think people look for a place more often than there is one.
Yeah, for sure. For me, the question really comes down to, I don't know. And I mean, it seems I'm speaking generically. So like, if you're convicted about this, again, Chad or whomever, I'm not preaching at you, but like it's fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the way that I really think about it is like in a family. If my kids are obeying me because they fear I would be violent unless they do, that's not what I'm looking for. And I don't think that's what God's looking for. I don't think in between human relationships, that's what any of us should be looking for. Like, I do think the hard question is that, I mean, and this is my position, I suppose, as a Christian anarchist, is that the state, what is it, Romans 12, the state bears the sword for a reason, because I think it's this, I mean, that's how I see the state. The state is like the institution that has the monopoly on violence.
Right.
That's what they do. They have violence to get people to do what they're supposed to do, to keep people in line. But I think as a Christian, you have to say, like, that's not ideal.
Right.
That's not the goal. Like, to try to say like that's just the nature, how things are, or like that the kingdom of God is going to be one that's like only held together through the threat of violence. No, I don't think so.
And in this world, in this life, to the extent that we have to ever act with violence or anger or what have you, I feel like we have to do it with a heavy heart. I feel like we shouldn't be ever celebrating it. Like when we take out like an enemy or whatever, it shouldn't be a time to like dance on his grave. It should be a time to say a prayer for him. You know, that's how I feel about things. But
Right.
To what you were saying, like I feel as though, kind of looping back around to what was his name, Chad, who was also asking this question about the why even bother again. Like, we're back to why even bother. If universalism is true and everybody's going to get saved anyway, is it really that useful to let people know that? And I still think that at the end of the day, if we are going, it depends, are we acting out of love or fear? And if we're acting out of love, then we want to make people's lives better. We want to give people hope. We want to bless people. And if we trust that God is, that the truth of God is attractive, if we trust God's ability to attract, then we should be opening up that attraction. We should be opening up that ability for his love to attract. And if we, and like you, and if we are doing things to avoid punishment, that's not acting out of love anyway. And we have to get to the point in which we're motivated by love to make it across the finish line in the first place. So anything that helps to cultivate acting out of love, I don't think necessarily is very compatible with cultivating acting out of fear.
Yeah, I think that's like that's a big problem with a lot of the, like, any sort of Christian nationalism is like, well, we're just gonna like regulate and like make porn illegal, and it's just like, not only is that like whatever, I don't want to just attack like how dare they ever want political power or anything, but it's like it hides the fact that, like, well, you're so busy building this thing and melding together violence and your beliefs and all these things that you're not doing something else that could be better, you know? Like, you're not building up a community. It's like, okay, you could run for governor and say, like, oh, I'm going to turn the state of, South Carolina into like the most Christian state, and I'm going to spend the next 20 years like really campaigning and getting people on my side and like, making these promises of what I'm going to do. Or like, you could just build up a church where people go to that church out of love for one another and like build each other up out of love. And it's like, well, but if I was governor, I could just all do this in a day with the stroke of a pen. It's like that stroke of the pen is choosing violence over choosing love, It's like, well, okay, now porn's illegal in South Carolina, like, or whatever, whatever the issue is. But it's like, have you really altered fundamentally? Because like in a community, you can really alter someone's life at a fundamental level. But can you really do that with the stroke of a pen as the governor, through violence, through like, oh, we're going to send a SWAT team to your house because you went to like Pornhub.com, Is that really that much better than, the people who are actually altered by encountering someone and like that that spirit changing them. So
Yeah, because you want people to not want to use porn, not to be scared that you're going to throw them, that you're going to like fine them or throw them in prison for using porn.
but it's also like, yeah. I mean, I see that, but it's also like all that time you spent trying to get the SWAT team together and, you know, telling people like you're going to go to jail if you do this, you could actually be spent like in communion with those people and loving those people,
Right.
you know. And it's like, it's not just like, oh, well, how dare you ever use political power? Because political power gets used all the time. And, you know, like we shouldn't like, you know, I mean, technically it's illegal to like jaywalk, you know, and they can throw you in jail for that or, you know, write you a ticket or whatever it is. But, you know, so it's like we deal, you know, political power is a real thing that we deal with. But at the same time, do we want to put all our time and effort into political power versus like loving one another and changing people through communion?
And I think obviously everybody here agrees that sometimes political power is necessary, and sometimes maybe not for the example you gave, but for other things in life, you know, you have to have the power to arrest people, et cetera, put people in jail. Sadly, that's just a reality we live in. But I think the reason why we have these sort of punitive rules in human life is that we don't have the power to read hearts. We don't have the power that God has exactly to transform people the way he can. I don't think we have to put those limitations on God. Like, God can read hearts. God doesn't have to simply go by the external, what it appears you're doing and the reasons why it appears you're doing it. God can read hearts and God can change hearts. So I think he doesn't have to go about things the way that we would with our fellow human, you know?
Yeah. He knows us better than we know ourselves. All right, guys, I'm going to close this out. You got final words?
No, God bless.
No. All right. No, that was good. Thanks for coming on. I think that is ultimately true, is that that's a good word, Pickens, that God doesn't have to coerce. Like, he just doesn't have to. He can give people.
You said it better in one line than I said it in like a million lines. That's
No,
exactly what I'm trying to say.
It was good. What's so wild, part of the whole, I think, personalist thing and Christ in me is that God, because everybody's so different and what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. Like, I'll say something repeatedly and it won't, like, even if it is true, people won't hear it. And then you'll say it and someone will hear it.
Right.
You know, that's just how it works. But no, I appreciate you. I appreciate you going on. You were just faithfully, you know, just leaving comments on Jacob's stream as he was just calling me an idiot, which is always nice.
Yeah.
So it's always good. Man. What, Alan, I was going to tell you there was some show. Whenever I'm watching TV or movies or anything, I always think of Alan because Alan has his like movie project. What is it?
The movie database.
Yeah, the movie recommendation thing.
Yeah, trying to revive that. Yeah, dang.
It's a good idea. I love films like that. So that's a good. Reach out to Alan if you guys have connections somehow to get to him and the movie database. What is it called? What's the website?
Yeah, themoviedb.org.
Yeah. Anyhow, it's like a movie recommendation thing because I love movies.
Yeah.
In agreement.
That's all we need. That's it. That's how we're closing. All right. Thanks, guys.
Right. We love movies. God bless.
God bless. God bless movies. Bye.
Bye-bye.